in college. There was an intro course, but I skipped it, which kind of have regrets on. But yeah, so you guys are also doing much better than me because at least you are picking it up now.
Yeah, I can relate on that, like Python or just any coding language, you sort of just pick up along the way. So I never did like a web dev course either. It's just more like I learn along the way and use online resources. So that's really awesome. Um, nice. Thank you. And then, so we wanted to share a little bit about what is software engineering, and just to like, I know like there's a lot of big words when people explain like, oh, we make like products and applications, but really software engineering is just like applying and writing code that will create different types of software, and that can come in the form of like products that you might have in mind is just like iPhones, and yeah, everything is essentially like powered by code. And so when we develop like products in our day-to-day jobs, we actually have to like write out the plan of like what we want to do and the timeline, and then actually like figure out what types of coding languages, what types of tools will I have to use. And that actually takes up like half the time. So the coding aspect is actually like the shortest, or at least for me. I don't know about Quinn. Um, but software engineering is a lot of it is actually having the effective uh, skills to communicate with your team, because a lot of times, especially in the industry, you're working off time is like the most expensive thing. So you don't want to like delay something. And software engineering is really just creating these products during a specific timeline. And you as an engineer coming in, people like your team members trust you that you have the skills to write the code. And in the meantime, like obviously you'll run into bugs, but it applying all those concepts and knowledge that you learn in school or in college in the future is very essential. Quinn, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, definitely. I think something that surprised me about working is like how much time you actually spend in like in meetings, talking to people, even like writing. Like you write a lot of plans, and that actually takes up a lot of your time. And it's not just, simply fixing things, coding. And that's something that surprised me. And then personally, I work on the pricing team. So for us, it's really important to like communicate our projects in a way that's understandable for our business partners, because that's really like our end goal. And yeah, I think keeping your end goal in mind, it has been like kind of a new concept for me, because in school we're just given small projects and they're very like there's usually like one good solution, and it's not like a ton of like planning, timing, and like communicating about the different ways you could solve problems. Yeah.
Yeah, and to echo on that, I think in the future, or especially like in this developer program, in week 4, you'll be actually creating your own hackathon project. So in the meantime, like always having that ahead of time, like planning of what you're going to do. And if you plan to work in a team, you'll get to experience what it's like to do all the planning. Like maybe someone in your team, like, oh, I want my website to look like this, but you have another idea. Like having that effective communication is highly essential. And I feel like if you have that teamwork aspect, like having those skills is like halfway there into like, potentially doing a software engineering job. Um, for me, like to do like clarify, like I feel like in school I wasn't a really great mathematician or anywhere near like super good at math or science, but really is just being communicative and being open to try out new like skills. I think a lot of you guys have learned different coding languages before, or even are new to coding. And that's totally fine, because when you actually start like at a company, like when I started work at Microsoft like 3 weeks ago, I had to like relearn or actually like learn new tools and coding languages that I didn't learn in school. So you can see that a lot of the skills that you learn in school doesn't directly apply to your day-to-day job, because it really just comes with like how do you adapt to something. If someone gives you like, hey, do this, and you're kind of like puzzled, like how do I do it, you actually have to take the initiative to ask questions, which kind of leads on to our next slide. is what does it take to be a software engineer? So a lot of things that I've talked about is like being effective in communication, and I can tell like a lot of you guys are super super active on Discord, and I highly encourage and applaud you guys for doing that because a lot of people who are like super shy and they're afraid to ask questions, it really blocks them from like improving their skills or progressing in their project. Like you can imagine when you guys are on coding sessions or on a lesson or doing a quiz, someone's like, oh wait, I don't know how to do this question. And I think that's a great way to just like, be completely honest, because a lot of times when you work sort of hidden in your own little shell, like, oh, I'll be fine, but you're actually super stuck, right? Um, that happens all the time for me when I work at my job. Like there's a lot of adults saying a bunch of new like terminologies, like and it's really scary because I'm like, oh, I'm not qualified or I don't really know what I'm doing. And I feel like you guys would feel that too when you're doing coding sessions or even just working on activities in the camp. And so I think that's like definitely number one essential. Quinn, what do you have anything to say about?
Yeah, totally agree with all of that. I think something really important to kind of learn as you work with people is finding a good balance between finding your own answers and asking for help. And for me, it was hard to ask for help because I like being able to show that I can find my own answers, but sometimes you do need help. And I think people that you work with really enjoy seeing that you at least tried first before you came to them. They like asking you like, oh, what did you try? Or what did you try to Google, So there's a really good balance and it differs between people you work with. But yeah, I think like personally, it was harder for me to ask for help than to try hard by myself. And so I would really encourage you guys to, try both, see what works for you. We have the office hours channel for a reason. So don't be shy, but also like, yeah, like try yourself too and show us like what you tried. And I think that creates a really good working environment as well. So you guys can test that out in this program.
For sure. Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think also one thing is that, like Quinn said, like when you actually have the questions, like don't come in saying like, oh, how do I do this? Right. It's more like I've tried, looking at the coding session slides and following this step on this slide, and I couldn't figure out how to do that. Like when someone asks me that, then it gives me more clarity on like, what can I help you with specifically. I think a lot of you guys, I don't want to be like sort of like rude saying like, oh, have you even read the instructions? Because I feel like that's like, scary to say, especially for you guys when I say that. And I apologize if I ever come off as rude in a sense, like when I do that. But in even the real world, like my coworkers, like no one really wants someone to just keep like asking questions like, oh, I don't know how to do this. Because we can't help you if you don't take the initiative to actually figure out, like at least try, like experimenting with the code or doing some googling. So I think that's would be super helpful for you guys in the future is the last point, which is adapt to new skills and work environments, because in software engineering field you're never always working on a product. You can be working on multiple applications. And when I mean by products and application, you can probably imagine, like for me, I'm working at Microsoft, and so I'm actually in charge of the Windows team. So Windows is like the operating system that everyone kind of uses. So we work on doing data like analysis and stuff like that. And so that's the application and product that I'm focused on. And maybe in a couple years when I get not bored, but like, I want to try something new, I'll go to another product, maybe like Microsoft Word or Microsoft Office. Those are always like routes of opportunity that you can try out. But what people like sort of like look for in terms of a good software engineer, that is that they can adapt to new settings. And so even in like your coding sessions and even in the activities that you're doing in this program, you're constantly like adapting to like a mentor meetup, like the environment, like what do I have to do there, and then going to coding session and trying it out individually. And I think that's a great way for you to start practicing and seeing like what are things that I can do to improve sort of my ability to adapt to new environments. So yeah. Quinn, do you have anything to say about that? Or maybe share a little bit about what product you're working on at Lyft?
Yeah, so I'm working on pricing and we have basically a ton of models that like determine the price, but personally I work on like supporting those. These are like pretty vague words, but yeah, basically I work on making sure our prices are correct. And yeah, I think that there there's like kind of multiple parts to being a good software engineer. One is like knowing your own product is really important, but that's not the most important because obviously we're going to move around in our careers. So I think having these fundamental skills that we're going to show on the next slide is like very important to, yeah, your career. And I guess I'll just start speaking on these and then Elizabeth, you can cut in. Um, so these are like not only important skills for like us currently, but like skills you can build even before you become a software engineer. So for you guys, you can practice your teamwork and your adaptability to like approaching new problems, using new skills. And then finally, your patience, which I guess Elizabeth, you can talk more about this, but patience like means a lot for me, a lot of different things, not only with your like people that you work with, to be patient for them to like give you input and feedback and answers, but also like with yourself because you're gonna also mess up and it's important to be patient in all these aspects. But yeah, Elizabeth, you can add more.
Yeah, no, those are great points. So patience, I think, is sort of thing that something we haven't covered because I think we've talked a lot about teamwork and adaptability. Patience is just like being patient with like not only like I can imagine like when you guys are doing coding, like starting a new project and you get a bug, right? So it's like kind of a pain because you're like, why isn't it working? I get that all the time, especially in college when we're doing like assignments. You see like your classmates going ahead and like, finishing steps 1 to 5, but you're still stuck on like step 2. And it's frustrating when you are working on coding sessions or just projects to like do that debugging process. And that's the part where you come in and you have to be confident in that you ask people questions, like you ask your teammates, like you ask your classmates, like if you're in school, you see someone getting to step 5, ask them like, how did you get there? Like I tried this, I didn't get there. And those are always good ways for you to not only like practice not being shy of asking questions, but also knowing that as you try out different ways to solve that bug, you'll get there. Like, there's times when I was working in college on like homework assignments that were like for me super hard, but super easy for someone else. And I just knew like, I have my learning process or the time it takes for me to learn takes longer than other people. Other people may learn faster, but I'll get there like some time, like I won't sleep until I finish this kind of vibes, which probably is not good for you guys because you guys are young. But knowing that you have sort of the grit, like to keep going, even though like you see people ahead of you, like, oh, they've learned coding since they were 5, I'm not going to win that race, or something. Like having patience to tackle sort of anything in your way is really essential if you want to do sort of just, it's kind of like a real world, like in the real world, you'll see people ahead of you all the time, either that they've learned coding way ahead of the game or they have internships. And those are things that you have to like keep in mind that like sort of like milestones that you want to achieve, and don't take them as sort of like, oh, I will never get there. Just be patient with the process. And actually in the next part, we're going to have like a Q&A where you guys can ask us a little bit about our road to actually doing software engineering, because I know it's definitely not an easy route, and in STEM a lot of people want to do engineering, and maybe in college there's always different routes to everyone's journey. And so we'd love to share like a little bit about how we got these opportunities, like working full time at big companies like Lyft and Microsoft. And so I wanted to move on to like the Q&A, which is sort of the last aspect of this brown bag, because we want to keep it more of a conversation with you guys. So if you guys have questions, feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll group down to answer them. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, okay, thank you. Hi, now, thanks for showing your camera. It's great to see you. And I saw you had a question about, do you specialize in web development or data programming? Oh, that's a really good question. Honestly, I'll answer that first. In my job, I don't specialize in anything specifically like web development or data. I would say my job is more related to data programming, because I'm writing in Python a lot. And but it's never really like, web development and data programming is not the end of computer science. There's so many things. Like there's people who work on machine learning or like data science or game development, creating Xbox. Like a lot of that is like really geared towards different fields. But to answer that, yeah. And then Quinn, do you have any?
Yeah, so I agree. I'm mostly data programming because I work with prices, so numbers, so it's very Python based. But yeah, you can have jobs where you're very much one or the other. But for me, I actually, in my job, we have like little websites for just internal use for just Lyft employees. And I've actually worked on those too. So I've done like a bit of both. And I think most people do a bit of both, but yeah. So Elizabeth, do you want to move on to the next question?
Yes. There's someone who directly messaged me, but I see one that's like shared with everyone, so I'll answer that one first. So the question from Chanmin, thanks for sharing your camera. Great to see you. Is, do you have to apply or does the company ask? And I'm assuming this is for the job, right? So I think it's very rare that the company will ask you, because a lot of times, you're a college student and you don't have that much experience yet. So what you have to do is basically, I like to think of this as you kind of have to knock on their front door, like, hey, hi, I'm Quinn, or hi, I'm Elizabeth, and I'm interested to get a job, right? But a lot of people are very interested in doing software engineering, and so you actually have to like sort of prepare, like, what are you gonna say? Like, you have 1 minute to tell your future employer, like the person at Microsoft, like, why should I hire you out of everyone else? And a lot of times is in college, you'll actually in the end of this program, we're gonna kind of walk you through how to create a resume. So I know it's a little early for you guys, but you'll always want to have reference to like, what are your credentials? Like, what skills do you have, right? So if like Chanmin, like maybe you're learning Python right now, and you can tell them like, I have a couple months experience of Python, and like, you want to approach the companies that you want to apply to and really like market yourself towards them. But I think that's sort of like an extension of your question. So I don't want to go too deep into that. Quinn, do you have anything to add?
I think I'll add more when we answer later questions, but do you want to answer your DM first?
Yeah. So someone asked me, what do you do at work? Is it mainly coding? I know you said collaboration is important, but like your actual work? That's a really great question, because I feel like sometimes when people explain their job, day-to-day job, it's like very vague, right? So what I do, I'll tell you more specifically. I wake up in the morning and then I walk to my computer, and I normally have a sync with my mentor. My mentor is just someone I work with as a coworker, and they sort of tell me like, oh, what's the plan for your project? Because when I started my role, they gave me a project that's focused on sort of doing data science analytics. Right now, I'm not at the phase where I'm doing a lot of coding yet because I'm still planning. I'm still planning what I'm going to do in July, August, and September, and like making sure all of that works until I start coding. So to answer your question, I haven't, my job is mainly coding, but at least half of it is planning. So yeah, is that
Yeah, I can answer that too. So right now I'm working on a really big project that basically like we have a lot of things we have to do manually and we're trying to make them automatic. So that's my project right now. It's huge. It's taken me a few months. So my day to day, I have a bunch of small parts of the project that I work on, and then I code those and then I submit them to my coworkers. They review it, tell me like what to fix, what to change, and then I approve those. And then I work on the next thing. That's basically what I do. And that, yeah, so most of my day is actually coding, but also I have meetings with other coworkers where I just tell them about the project and like how it's going, and then they tell me any concerns or any changes they want. So it's a lot of like talking to people about what I'm doing, but it's also a lot of just, yeah, coding work. People tell me what to change, then I change it. It's a lot of collaboration. Yeah, do we want to go on to the next question?
Yeah, I'll answer this one really quick because Chanman asked, what is the main difference between a computer program and computer software? So computer programs, it's sort of really similar to what you guys are doing with data programming, like writing Python files and writing a program, like you guys did Mad Libs and Space Travel. Those are all computer programs. But computer software is more of like a compilation of programs that work in synchronous. So things like Windows is a software, I think, and
Mhm.
like Mac, like you have Apple, Mac is also a computer software that runs something. But behind all of the computers that you guys are currently running right now is a compilation of programs. So I would say, yeah,
Mhm.
that's, I'll just answer that. And then we'll just hop over to the next question is um, by Danzo, did you have to change through multiple languages of coding before finding one you're interested in, or do you just find one and stay with it? Quinn, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, sure. So like throughout college, you're probably gonna have to learn like at least three or four different ones. Um, but they're all like, so the way we see it, I'm gonna speak for both of us. Once you learn one, learning the next one is not very difficult because they're all similar in some ways. And um, so yeah, I did have to change through multiple languages. And as for finding ones that I'm interested in, there are some that are better than others, in my opinion. But most of the time, it's not up to me personally what I'm going to code in. It's usually in college, it was up to the professor. And now in my workplace, it's up to someone like way higher up than me what we're coding in. So it's important when you take classes and when you find work that you choose a work or a class that has the language you want to do. Um, but most of the time they're pretty similar, so I wouldn't worry too much about the language itself. Yeah, Elizabeth, do you have anything to add?
No, I think you answered that one. So I'll just move on to the next one because there's a lot. But
Yeah.
Ava asked, what types of jobs specialize more on web development? That's actually a great question because right now you guys are a lot of you guys are half of you guys are doing web development track, and I like to think about an analogy is like you have a house, right? So the decorations on the outside is sort of what you're doing. Like web development is creating that website, like what you see on the outside. Just like if you open up I don't know, Microsoft.com, you'll see a website, right? That's like what you see in the front. And then the back end is like is what's inside of the house, right? The house, there's decorations on the outside, but inside everything functions differently. So the types of job that would more specialize on web development is if you want to go into creating like websites or applications, meaning like, apps on your iPhone. Those are all more focused on web development because it requires you as a software engineer to have the experience of, what do people like to see when they're on a website? What will catch their eye, right? Because a lot of products, like, if you go on apple.com, they have like this really cool scroll way to see a bunch of different products that they have, like MacBooks, you scroll it and then the whole website keeps flowing with it, which is way cooler than, maybe our website right now. But they have these trained software engineers who are really good at understanding what do customers like, right? That's how they're able to market, their products to people. And so yeah, sorry, that was a little bit longer, but if you want to specialize in web development, it's a lot about like designing that product and creating, sort of decorating the front of your house as an analogy. So yeah. Quinn, is that okay? And then
Yeah, that's good.
do you want to do the next question? I'll read the next question. Kevin asks, is there some sort of email box to ask or the company, or do you ask when they have a now hiring thing?
Yeah, I'll answer that. So most companies on their website, they have like careers and you can just apply there. But I think another big thing for college students is companies will come to your college and will want to tell you about their company. And usually then you can meet some hiring people and that will really help you as well because they kind of know more about you than if you just apply through their website. But yeah, so the website is kind of like the email box. But yeah, they'll also come meet you at your college, assuming, yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, no, that was a good question. Like, so the whole like interview and like applying to your job, right? In the future, you guys will have to apply to jobs, is really similar to like applying to the developer program. You got to submit your application, right? And we use the Google form that flows. We get to see everyone's responses. And then, like us, like pretending we're the people at the company, we go through all these responses and we pick out who's the best applicant, which is obviously you guys. So
Actually,
you guys. But sorry, Chairman, did you say something?
actual application, we don't have to pay to get it.
No, it's so the whole process is you apply as a developer, and then we select students and we go into the program. So that's sort of a little bit different from in the real world. People don't just look at your application and your resume. You actually have to do an interview. So that's like the extra step for people working in college.
So if you get into the interview and it goes well and you get like enter, like do you have to like do like an entering fee or something like we did here or not?
No.
No. So when you get into your job, you actually get paid to work. So you get paid to actually like be a part of that company. Does that answer your question?
How often is there joining benefits?
How long is, sorry, what?
Like if you apply at Samsung and get in, like, yeah, you get like a discount for like Samsung phones and stuff like that. Is that like the case for every company or like not?
Oh, every company has benefits. Yeah, I mean, it might not always be a Samsung phone. For Lyft, you get like a small discount on rides. But yeah, every company has some small benefits here and there.
Yeah, it varies across companies. So
Yeah.
okay,
Okay.
I'll hop on to the next question.
Yeah.
Carol said, do you have any tips for practicing a programming language to sharpen your skills or making sure you don't forget technical things? Quinn, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, personally for me, I don't try to sharpen my skills outside of work because work is very consuming, and same with school. But if you ever want to, it's very easy to find an online resource that does it. I'm sorry, my house is being loud, but there's a lot of online websites where you can like do like small coding problems, and that will help you. But yeah, most of the time, I think, yeah, I don't know, Elizabeth, do you want to add on to
Yeah.
that?
No, I think thank you for sharing that. I think Carol, I practice a lot of my programming language by just creating personal projects. So things like STEM League is kind of our collective personal project to like share with you guys our knowledge of like coding, right? And Quinn and I were actually like teaching assistants in college. We taught people how to, taught people intro to programming. So that's actually a way for you to practice your programming language. As long as you're teaching what you're learning to someone else, it always allows you to learn it better and allows you to practice and, refine things that you didn't understand before. And also, if you apply it to something like making your own personal project in the future, it doesn't have to be like just a hackathon project. It could be something you extend to like what you do on a regular basis. There's always opportunities to learn new technical tools so that you don't forget. So yeah, that's a really great question. And then I'll just answer Chanmin's question. I think there was two. How many coworkers do you have? I think we have a lot, obviously, but within our team, probably like around 8 to 10 people. And I think Quinn can agree on that. And but at Microsoft and Lyft, it's a couple thousand people that we're working with, but within our little circle, our team is a little way smaller, so probably less than 10. um, and the hardest coding project that I've done is, I think STEM League is like my coding project in a way. Just managing a lot of people is a little bit difficult, but I think seeing people like you guys like face to face during these brown bags is really awesome. So Quinn, what about you?
Yeah, I would say it's my current project that I'm working on. Just because it's taken me a few months, it's definitely the most amount of code I've written. And it's like the, yeah, it's the biggest project I've worked on, which is why I think it's the hardest. But also because there's like really no right answers to anything, unlike like when I was in school. There's usually, usually after you're done with the project, they tell you what the right answer to everything was. But with like this one, there is none. So I would say that makes it hard too.
Yeah, thank you. And then I see I think we're going to stop the questions now, but we're going to continue answering everything that was in the chat. So Anya, or someone messaged me directly and asked me what was the interview process to get our jobs as a software engineer.
Mhm.
Quinn, do you want to share or?
Yeah, I'll just quickly talk about mine. So I was an intern and then I became full-time. So my interview process was a little bit smaller, but originally, like, yeah, I've interviewed for a bunch of jobs, so I'll just give you like the general gist of what they all are. So usually you talk to someone on the hiring like side that's not a software engineer. They tell you about the company, they ask you some personal questions, and then usually you have a few more interviews after that that are all coding. So they'll give you a problem and then you'll solve it. And then that can go anywhere between like one time to like 3 to 5 times. Um, but yeah, that's basically what mine were like. Elizabeth, do you want to share?
Yeah, I think mine is really similar to Quinn in that like after you apply, you actually people will schedule interviews with you. And at those interviews, what they ask you is it could be questions about like, what's your experience in coding, right? Like, have you maybe shared a personal project that you've done? And that's why things like developer program allows you to build sort of like skills in creating your own personal projects and also having something to talk about at those interviews. And a lot of times at the interviews, there's also a technical process, which they would probably ask you a question like, given a string, right? So in Python, we learn strings. Given a string, how do you reverse a string, right? Those are more specific, but you would actually have to show them how you solve the question. And a lot of people solve it differently. So they want to see how you solve that problem and they assess you based off of these interviews. So yeah, I hope that answered your question. And I'll move on to the next question, which now asked, have you ever got bored of coding? I think, yeah, I think so sometimes. But I think coding is, there's just so much to learn in coding, that like, there's a lot of coding languages. If you actually get bored, you can try and do another different project, or you can try another language. And so it's never really been like completely boring. It's just more like, I'm tired of what I'm learning right now. I want to try something else. Does that answer your question, Dale? And I think Quinn, could you add on too, if you?
Yeah, I agree with that. I've definitely worked on like some little things that I thought were boring. I mean, in school, you usually have less of a choice, but in the real world, if you actually get bored of your project, you can just tell your coworkers, your manager that you're bored, and they'll usually try to find something not boring for you. So I definitely have, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. And then next is by from Anya, and she asked, she already asked that. And she said, do you ever forget how to say something easy in coding? Of course. Yeah, I feel like when you explain coding, it's you kind of like, we might explain it more like easily because we've been in the field, we've been practicing it for a long time. For you guys, like you guys sometimes might find it more difficult to explain things like either over chat or like over call, because a lot of the technical vocabulary is not something you've like seen a lot. And that's perfectly normal. That doesn't mean that you're not good at coding, right? It means that you're just new to it. Like you need to get used to, just like learning a new language. Like, I don't know, if you learn English, right? You might not know how to say everything correctly, like grammatically correct. But as you progress, like, even knowing like in tech or learning a language, for example, you'll actually get used to it. And like, now we're like speaking English, like it's, it's pretty easy to do. So once you get into that environment and once you practice a lot, you will actually improve a lot in how you communicate things technically in coding. Quinn, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'm not sure if she meant like literally coding or talking about code, but I've definitely forgotten things either way. I think it's important to remember that no one's gonna punish you for forgetting something easy, and you can always like look things up. I definitely look things up that I don't need to look up all the time. Like I forget very simple things about Python sometimes. Um, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if I misunderstood the question, but yeah, I think that's a really cool question to ask, because in any field, like, don't ever be afraid to like say like, I don't know, or I forgot. You just look it up. Google's your best friend, and um, you know, it's just a search away. So next question is from Ava. Do you have any tips for trying to get a job in coding? Great question. I think that's a question I would love to answer. So specifically, I think getting a job in coding requires you to probably have some domain knowledge, which you guys are building right now in this program. And by domain knowledge is just saying like, do you have any skills related to coding that you could tell maybe an employer about? And you guys do, right? You guys are building projects every week, and you guys are getting a better understanding of coding every day. But in terms of getting a job in coding is very challenging, at least for me, because when you start out in college, you're sort of like, you have a new slate, like you're starting like on a blank piece of paper, and you want to make sure that you are sort of putting yourself out there, because a lot of people are really shy about like going to career fairs, because the only way that you would get like Microsoft or Lyft or any big company to notice you is by first applying. But a lot of times applying just won't do it, because they have thousands of people applying to that job. And so when you think about that, what can you do to make yourself stand out? Probably doing the extra mile, like going to a career fair where people will physically, like from Microsoft, representing these companies, and you can go and tell them a little bit about you and share a little bit about yourself. And through that process, maybe you'll get into a interview process with them and potentially get a job. But that's just how the cycle goes. But to be more specific, like in things like high school, I know a lot of you guys are a lot younger, is when you're going into high school, to do activities related to coding will always be beneficial, like in STEM, like joining a coding club or something, and then or getting more, improving more in math and science is always helpful, because you're always constantly, like, math and science doesn't really relate that much to coding, but there's ties to it that if you improve your math, you'll probably have a better understanding when you're coding. And I think improving your ability to like try new things and also like improve on your math and science domain is really important, especially in high school. And so I encourage you, like, even if you don't have the top-notch grade, never to be discouraged, because a lot of people like myself, I didn't start coding until my second year of college. So you guys are way ahead of the game. But just because you're ahead of the game doesn't mean like you just stop now and like chill forever. You know, you want to keep going. You want to actually be active about the activities or events that you attend, because you never know where your next employer is. Like maybe you go to a hackathon. That's like, you know, when we go back in person, there's hackathons that are live, and you get to talk to people, and they might be asking like, oh, you know, I really want to intern in my company. Are you interested in an internship? Right? You know, things like that is always possible. So if you put yourself out there, that's always a really good approach to potentially getting a job in the future, but you'll always get experience in that field. So yeah, sorry that was super long, but Quinn, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think you basically covered it, but yeah, with anything you want to do, don't be afraid to take opportunities and take initiative. And that's really the most important thing.
And then, yeah, I think the last couple of questions I'll answer super quick because we're kind of closing in, and I really appreciate everyone's time to be here today. Someone asked, will we have brown bag talks every week? Yes, that is the plan, and we'll sort of slowly announce them every week at the start of every week. And yeah, I think that's most of the questions, but oh, sorry, I think Chairman asked, in college, do you learn code from the basics? Yes, you actually learn code from the basics in introductory courses in college. So at UW, for example, there's an intro class that's taught in Java, and you sort of start learning that language from like very basic, like what is coding, sort of what your guys are doing right now. And actually a lot of things from this program is really derived from my own experience as college students. So I'm actually bringing in a lot of things that you guys would see in college into aspects of this program. For example, your mentor meetups, like you meet twice a week. In college, you actually have something called sections, which is basically meetups with different groups of students, and you sort of review activities from lectures, which is lessons, right? So we kind of have that structure where we have lessons and meetups, and that's really similar to college. Like you essentially have lessons on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, or at least for UW, there's quiz sections, and quiz sections is just like a meetup with a TA. So it's really similar to what you would experience in a college level, but obviously toned down for you guys. And yeah, and Quinn, do you have anything to add before we sort of close off for the day?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for joining. And if you have any questions, I'm generally available on Discord. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you guys for joining and all the good questions. I really appreciate that you guys are participating. And yeah, I guess I'll stop this recording and see you guys